Hello and welcome to Narayana IAS. I am Pratik, your faculty for Daily News Analysis. Now students, in today's session, we'll focus on 5 most important topics from the Hindu and the Indian Express. So let's have a quick brief about the topics that we shall be discussing in today's session. The first article we have taken from Indian Express, page number 10. Now in this article, we are going to understand about the importance of Central and Eastern Europe in India's foreign policy and India's deepening engagement with these regions. The second article we have taken from Indian Express, page number 10. Now in this article, we are going to understand about the reforms in civil services, and the same context will understand about the lateral entry and the associated problems with it. The third article we have taken from Indian Express, page number 13. Now in this article, we are going to understand the dispute between the telecom operators and the social media companies with respect to their interpretation of telecommunication service. The fourth article we have taken from Hindu, page number 14. Now in this article, we will understand the 2+2 dialogue. The fifth article we have taken from Hindu, page number 10. Now in this article, we will understand about the ethanol blending program. And finally, we'll discuss few questions so that you understand the type of question that can be asked in the UPSC examination. So students, let's get started. Students, the title of the first topic is Delhi to Kyiv via Warsaw. So in this article, we'll understand the strategic importance of Central and the Eastern Europe. This topic is important from both the prelims as well as the mains perspective. In prelims, a map-based question can be asked, right? So let's go through a previous question. Why is India taking keen interest in the Arctic region? Which means a question can also be asked on Central and the Eastern Europe region, right? Now, what is the context? The context is that the Prime Minister of India was on his visit to Poland and Ukraine. This visit to Poland and Ukraine, it represents a pivotal, a very, very important moment in India's history or India's foreign policy. Why? Because this visit to Poland was Indian Prime Minister's first visit since 1979. And to Ukraine, it was first visit since independence. And this all is happening in the midst of a war in Ukraine. So this conflict has brought the Central and the Eastern European countries back into the global geopolitical tensions. And this visit by the Indian Prime Minister, it underscores India's intent to deepen engagement with the Eastern and the Central European countries. Now, let me try to highlight the historical and strategic importance of the Central and the Eastern Europe. But first, we'll try to understand which are the countries in the Central and the Eastern Europe. So these are the countries you see. These are the Eastern European countries and these are the Central European countries. So countries like Ukraine, Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, Nordic and the Baltic countries are very, very important in the Central and the Eastern European region, right? Now, the Central and the Eastern Europe has historically been a battleground for great power conflicts. And this makes this region very, very important. That is, it makes strategically important this region. Then, from the polarization of Poland in the 18th century to the Cold War era division between the Eastern Europe and the Western Europe, this region, the Central and the Eastern Europe, has been shaped by external forces like the Britain, United States, Russia, etc. The concept of heartland given by British, it emphasizes Eastern Europe as a pivotal, that is important region to achieve global dominance. That is, to achieve global dominance, you need to have control over this region. Today, the regions, the Central and the Eastern Europe regions, importance is underscored by its role in the ongoing Ukraine war, which has brought to the forefront the issues such as territorial integrity, sovereignty and global power balances. Central and Eastern Europe no longer are playing a passive role in the global affairs. They are actively engaged more and more in the overall global affairs of the world, right? This is how Central and the Eastern Europe is important, and as a reason a question can be asked in the UPSC examination. Why? because of the growing importance of Eastern and Central Europe in India's foreign policy. Now let us try to understand India's broader European policy. Now the focus of Indian foreign policy has moved beyond the traditional focus on countries such as Germany, France and UK. India was focused on these countries, but now India is moving beyond these countries to focus on other smaller countries as well. For example, we are expanding diplomatic and strategic engagement with other smaller countries like the Nordic as well as the Baltic countries. Now let me show you which are the Nordic countries and the Baltic countries. So Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania, these are the Baltic countries, and then Norway, Sweden and Finland, these are the Nordic countries. So Nordic and the Baltic countries, these are the countries with whom India is trying to deepen its engagement with other Central European countries as well. Second, India is also focusing on trade, technology and security. Now, India is deepening economic engagement with these countries in this region, and this can be reflected through initiatives such as India-EU Trade and Technology Council, India-Middle East-Europe Corridor. Now, this is India-Middle East-Europe Corridor. India, this is the Middle East, and this is how we are connecting to the Eastern European countries, right? Now, these initiatives underscores India's recognition that Europe, not only Germany, France and UK, but also other countries are economically and technologically very, very powerful countries. And that's the reason we also have broadened our engagement by including defense and security in our overall relation. The third is Central Europe's role in India's strategy. The Central Europe, especially Poland and Ukraine, the importance of these countries is increasing in India's foreign policy. Now, Poland, because of the rising economic and military power, its location, as well as the role Poland is playing in the European politics, Poland has become very, very important for our country. At the same time, Ukraine, despite the fact that it is in the midst of a devastation because of the agriculture capacity, because of the defense industry, even Ukraine is become a very, very important part of India's foreign policy. But the engagement is not going to be easy, which means we also need to understand the challenges. The first one is the geopolitical complexities. And what is the geopolitical complexity? The Eastern European countries, Poland, Ukraine, these countries were a part of USSR. Now they are independent and they are inching more close to the West. So the engagement with these countries is not going to be easy. We have to understand the geopolitical complexity. Russia does not want that the Eastern European countries should go close to the West. This is the condition or consideration that we have to understand. The second is balancing relationship with Russia. Now, Russia is our age-old friend. We have historical ties with Russia, not only after independence, but also before independence. So, it is very important for Indian foreign policy to balance our relation with Russia as well as the Eastern and the Central European countries. And for this, we need diplomatic maneuvering, that is deft diplomatic maneuvering. We have to navigate this complicated relationship so as it suits, it matches the national interest of our country. Then the economic and strategic uncertainties. We know that the European continent economically is a very powerful country, but because of the devastation, especially in the Eastern Europe, the economic recovery is not going to be smooth. So the point is, we have to take this consideration, these factors into consideration before we deepen our engagement with the Central and the Eastern Europe. These are some of the challenges that India will face when it deepens engagement with the Eastern and the Central European countries. What is the way forward? No matter what, we have to sustain our engagement with these countries. Why? Because these countries are strategically very, very important. And how do we sustain the engagement? By maintaining regular diplomatic interaction, by expanding trade partnerships and engaging in strategic dialogues with the countries in the Eastern and the Central European countries. And by doing this, it will help us to build trust and ensuring a mutually beneficial relationship. The next is we have to diversify economic ties. That is, we have to have economic ties in areas such as technology, defense and agriculture. Now, post the war, whenever the war ends, the reconstruction work in Ukraine will attract the Indian businesses to Ukraine. That's the reason we have to engage with these countries. It will open up opportunities for the Indian business people to take active interest in these countries. At the same time, Poland, as it is economically and militarily a powerful country, it will open opportunities for Indian businesses to engage with these countries in Central and the Eastern Europe. Strategic balancing. As I told you, we have to maintain balance between our ties with Russia and our new ties with the Central and the Eastern Europe. For that, we have to maintain strategic autonomy. And this balancing act between Russia and the Eastern European countries will be very, very important for our country to ensure that India's relationship in this region will not be a zero-sum game, but it will be a part of the broader strategy of constructive engagement. Then, India has to leverage the global partnership with countries such as USA and Europe. Now, with USA and Europe, we have good ties. So, we have to leverage our relationship with these global powers so that we can strengthen our position in these regions. For example, we can collaborate our efforts in defense, technology and infrastructure development so that we can help, or such steps will help India, or it will enhance India's influence and contribute to the peace and prosperity in the region. I hope students you understood all the points that we have discussed in this article. So please make sure that Eastern and Central Europe is a very, very important part in India's foreign policy. So question can be asked in the UPSC examination as well. So keep this thing in mind. Study the Central and the Eastern European country in your Atlas map so that whenever you get a question, you should be in a position to answer the question, right? Students, the title of the next topic is No Shortcuts, and in this article we'll understand the reforms in the civil services. In the same context, we'll understand about the lateral entry issue, right? And you can map this under GS paper 2. A previous question asked in the year 2017. What was the question? Initially, civil services in India were designed to achieve the goals of neutrality and effectiveness, which seems to be lacking in the present context. To agree with the view that drastic reforms are required in civil services. So, in drastic reforms, we have to discuss about lateral entry, right? So, what is the context? So, in this topic, in this article, we are going to understand the issues and opportunities in the Indian civil service system. Now, the Indian civil service system, which means the bureaucracy. Now, the bureaucracy has been inherited from the British times or the British era. Now, this bureaucratic structure has caused a lot of problem, because of which the governance has become totally ineffective. And that's the reason we need to think about lateral entry, and we can also discuss about the implication of lateral, or the implication of introduction of lateral entry, right? So, this is what the context is. Now, let us try to understand the historical context of the Indian civil service. The Indian civil service, which was established during the British time, was a highly centralized, hierarchical and rigid system, and it was only designed to serve the colonial interests. Now, after independence, we retained the bureaucratic structure but just reframed the Indian civil service to Indian administrative service. The structure was the same. The hierarchy was the same. We only changed the name. And this hierarchical structure was resistant to change and innovation, and that caused a problem, and that's the reason we are discussing about the reforms in these civil services. So what are the systemic issues in the Indian bureaucracy? One, the system is very, very rigid, and because of the rigidity in the system, it stifles, it completely curbs innovation and flexibility, because of which the governance becomes totally ineffective and the people suffer. Which means focus is given on the process than on the outcome. Second is bureaucratic inertia. Now, because of the rigidity in the structure, despite having capable and talented officers, we are not able to leverage their talent. Why? Because the system doesn't allow the officers to be flexible. This is the problem. Which means despite having talented and capable officers, we are not able to utilize their expertise, which means they cannot be flexible to introduce solution, or let's say new idea to bring solution to some of the most complicated challenges or problems that we have in our country. Third is resistance to change. Now, because of the changing time, it is expected that the bureaucracy should also understand the changing time and should make sure they are meeting the standards of people or meeting the standards of the changing times by changing the system so as to make the governance more effective. But unfortunately, this is not happening. The efficiency and results is taking a hit. Next is subsystem conglomeration. Now, civil service is not only about IAS or IPS. We have the state level civil servants, then the local level civil servants. So, civil service is a conglomeration of all this subsystem, and unless we have a robust system, the governance will always become ineffective and people will have to pay a big price because of this ineffective governance. So, in order to find a solution to the issues in our bureaucracy, the experts have pointed out at lateral entry. What is lateral entry? We are getting the experts from outside. For example, as of now, the UPSC, or let's say the state level PCS examination, they recruit these civil servants, right? Now, in lateral entry, we are getting people from outside, which means let's say private sector, or let's say academics. Let's say a person has worked for 20 years in the refinery industry. Now, he is an expert of that field. So, we are getting that person into the bureaucratic structure. And this lateral entry will be open at the mid and the senior level bureaucracy. By making sure that we involve or we get the lateral entrance, we can ensure that we have fresh perspectives, specialized skills, and new ideas into the functioning of the government. So, which means here we are getting the experts from outside. Now, let us discuss some of the pros and cons of the lateral entry. Before this, the second ARC Commission in 2005, the 6th Central Pay Commission in 2008, and Niti Aayog, all these have recommended that lateral entry should be brought in. Lateral entry is something the government of India should implement at the mid and the senior level to make the governance effective. Now, the pros or the advantages of the lateral entry. First, infusion of expertise. So, we can get the expertise from outside. Now, expertise is very, very important in areas such as technology, finance, and public policy. And expertise is very, very important to make the governance effective. Now, the civil servants, for example, the joint secretary level, or let's say the secretary level, they are manned by IAS officers. Now, these IAS officers are not experts. They work in many different departments or different sectors. So, they are not the experts. Now, in order to find solution to some of the most complicated challenges, we need experts, and we can get the experts from the private sector. Second, as the lateral entrance would come in, they would also bring innovation and fresh perspectives to find solution to some of the most complicated challenges our country is facing. Third is short-term problem solving. Now, what we can do is we can bring the lateral entrance for certain projects, or let's say specific projects, and the duration of this projects would be for, let's say, few years. And this can lead to quick and impactful outcome. The fourth one is, as we discussed that the IAS officers are not skilled. Here what we can do is we can bridge the skill gap by bringing in the lateral entrance from outside. The next is flexibility in appointment. Now here the government will have the flexibility to appoint people who are experts so that they can utilize the expertise of these people to improve, let's say for example, any sector. Let's say petroleum sector is going through certain challenges. Now here by having flexibility in the appointment process, the government can get experts to find solution to the issues that the petroleum sector is facing, right? So these are some of the pros or advantages of the lateral entry. What about the cons or the disadvantages? The first one is it undermines meritocracy. Now you know how difficult it is to crack the civil services. Now by breaking the lateral entrance, the meritocracy, right, the merit can be undermined. Why? Because in order to be an IAS officer, you have to clear prelims, mains and interview. By getting the lateral entrance from outside, there is a high chance that the merit-based system like UPSC can be undermined. Second is conflict with reservation policies. The purpose of reservation policies is social justice. Now by focusing on lateral entry, there is a high chance that the reservation system can be bypassed, right? Reservation system is meant for social justice, and it should not be the case that the lateral entry should conflict with the reservation policies. Third is the integration challenges. Now the lateral entrants who are coming from the private sector might face challenge to integrate into the bureaucratic structure. Why? Because the functioning in the government or the bureaucracy is very much different than what it is in the private sector. So the lateral entrants might face challenges to integrate themselves into the bureaucratic structure, and this can lead to friction between the bureaucrats and the lateral entrants, which might lead or result in reduced ineffectiveness. The next is short-term focus. Now as the lateral entrants are brought in for specific projects, this might lead to a question on their commitment to the government services. Now when you are working for the government, you need to be committed to the people, to the nation, to the government. Now if the lateral entrants will be brought in for specific projects, this can also lead to some vested interests which can affect the overall governance process, right? And the last is risk of resentment. Now as the government is contemplating to bring a lateral entrance, the existing or the current civil servants will not be happy. This might lead to resentment, and this might lead to frequent clashes between the civil servants and the lateral entrants, which can make the governance ineffective or which can compromise many things in the overall government functioning, right? Now lateral entry is something not new. For example, in the 40s and 50s, because of the shortage of qualified officers, the Nehru administration brought in few experts from the private sector. And it's not that lateral entry is bad. There are some successful examples. For example, the implementation of Aadhaar was done by Nandan Nilekani, who was not a part of bureaucracy, or he was not a civil servant. He was brought in from the private sector. Or let's say Manmohan Singh. The economic reforms of 1991 was a result of Manmohan Singh ideas. Now Manmohan Singh was not a civil servant, right? So such are few successful examples of lateral entrance bringing positive change in the system or in the overall governance. Now let us also try to discuss some constitutional and legal consideration. First one is the reservation policy. As I told you, the purpose of reservation is social justice, which means the lateral entry policy should be in alignment with the reservation policies. The next is the Supreme Court ruling. Now in the cons, we discussed that the lateral entry might compromise the merit system. But the Supreme Court had taken a very broader meaning of the word merit. And what is it? The Supreme Court highlighted that the merit should be understood in the broader context of social equality and inclusivity, which means we have to make sure that the lateral entry should be in alignment with the reservation policies. Way forward, we know that it is very important that we reform the civil services. The focus should be more on the outcome-oriented approach so that governance become more effective and people get the benefit of it. And the next is balanced lateral entry. As we discussed, the lateral entry should be in alignment with the reservation policies. At the same time, the appointment of lateral entrants should be transparent so as to avoid the perception of favoritism. The third is political ownership and coordination. Now, in order to bring lateral entrants from outside, there has to be a support from the central government as well as the state government to ensure that there is full-fledged support for the lateral entrants, and in this respect, Niti Aayog could play a very important role to ensure that there is coordination. And then we have to learn from global practices, for example, from countries like Australia and New Zealand. It doesn't mean that we just have to copy and paste it in India. We have to learn from the global practices and use it as per the Indian context. And finally, the implementation has to be gradual, which means we have to implement lateral entrant policy. We have to see, we have to monitor, we have to observe the changes, and if necessary, we have to make those minor changes. But the purpose, the overall purpose should be civil services should be reformed. Reformed in the sense so as to make the governance meaningful, impactful, and more effective. I hope you understood the entire article, right? Students, the title of the next topic is Broad Definitions in Telecom Act, Renew Tussle Between Telecoms and OTT. So, in this article, we understand about the Telecom Act that led to the dispute between the telecom operators and the social media companies. And we'll also know about the TRIA, that is the regulatory body that regulates the telecom industry in our country. And this topic is important from the prelims as well as the mains perspective, right? Now, there's a question asked on the petroleum sector in the year 2019, which means question can also be asked on the telecom sector, right? What is the context? The context is that there's a tussle between the telecom operators like Airtel, Jio, and social media companies or the interpretation. What is the interpretation? What constitutes telecommunication service under the new Telecommunication Act of 2023. This is the context. Now, the telecom operators like Airtel, Jio, they argue that over-the-top communication platforms like WhatsApp and Google Meet, they also fall under the definition of telecom service as per the new act. This is what the telecom operators are saying. Now, all the three major telecom operators like Jio, Airtel and Vodafone Idea have argued to the TRIA that the OTT platforms like WhatsApp and Google Meet should obtain the license from the government to perform or to provide these services to the people, right? Now, the Act of 2023 defines telecom services in a broad manner, right? What is the definition? Transmission, emission or reception of any messages by various means, and messages include any form of communication such as text, image, video or data stream. This is a broad definition of telecommunication or broad definition that is mentioned in the new act. Now, when the act was introduced, the government had publicly clarified that OTT platforms were not included under the telecom service definition. This is what the government had said, but it was not legally binding. Now, what is TRIA? It is an independent regulatory body which was established under this act, right? Which means it is a statutory body. Such type of questions will be asked in the UPSC examination, right? Now, it was created why? To regulate the telecom industry, so as to ensure the development of the telecommunication sector and protect the interests of the service providers like Airtel and consumers like us. The purpose is to regulate and manage the telecommunications sector. They regulate the tariffs for telecommunication sector, which means they increase the tariff, they reduce the tariff, but the purpose is that they promote fair competition. They prevent monopolistic practices in the market. This is about the triad. Now, the Cellular Operation Association of India, representing the telecom companies, they claim that OTT communication should be classified as access service to ensure a level or even playing field and consistent regulatory principles, which means that the telecom operators want that the OTT platforms which provide the same function. So, you know students that as of now we are using WhatsApp for making calls, right? Or we also use Google Meet, right, for communication, which means the usage of the text messages or let's say voice calls has reduced, and this has impacted the revenue of the telecom operators. And that is the reason that telecom operators want or request the TRIA that the OTT platforms such as WhatsApp and Google Meet, which we use for the communication purpose, should be brought under the telecommunication service, which means they should obtain the license. Now, why do the telecom operators want the OTT platforms to take the license? Because taking the license would involve cost, which means that the OTT platforms have to abide by a certain regulatory framework which would involve cost, and this can compensate or this can incur a cost to the OTT platforms, thus create a level playing field. But the OTT platform has refused to abide or has rejected what the telecom operators have demanded from the OTT platforms. This is the article all about. I hope you understood it. So, the title of the next topic is India-Japan conduct 2+2 dialogue with focus on Indo-Pacific. Now, in this article, it is important to understand what is this 2+2 ministerial dialogue. You can map this under GS paper 2 international relations. Now, a previous question was asked in the year 2019. The time has come for India and Japan to build a strong contemporary relationship, one involving global and strategic partnership, right? Now, what is the context? The third 2+2 ministerial dialogue between India and Japan was recently held in New Delhi. Now, this 2+2, it is very important to understand this 2+2 ministerial dialogue. 2+2, now 2 plus 2. 2 represents the foreign minister and defense minister of one country, that is India, versus foreign minister and defense minister of another country, that is India and Japan. Now, the purpose of such platform or the purpose of such 2+2 ministerial dialogue is to isolate the security and strategic issues from other issues, right? Which means the focus has to be more on these strategic and these security issues to understand each other's strategic concerns and sensitivities. Now, India has this 2+2 ministerial dialogue with 5 countries, which are this: USA, Australia, Japan, United Kingdom, Brazil and Russia. We started having this 2+2 ministerial dialogue with Brazil from March 2024 onwards. So, remember all these countries because this is the essence of this article. This is what UPSC will ask a question on. All these countries. So, remember all these countries. Now, key highlights. First, reaffirmation of the rules-based international order, which means both the countries committed that the international order should be rules-based, which means each and every country should respect the territorial integrity of other state, other country. At the same time, the dispute should be resolved peacefully. 1. Second, Indo-Pacific cooperation. Both the countries committed to keep the Indo-Pacific region safe, and both the countries committed that they would cooperate to keep this region safe. Third, both the countries also cooperated on the defense and security issues as well. Now, both the countries participate in the military as well as the naval exercise. For example, the military exercise is known by the name Dharma Guardian and the naval GMX. So this names, they are very important for the UPSC prelims examination. We also have Malabar. Now Malabar is a naval exercise between 4 countries: India, US, Australia and Japan. So this again is very important for the prelims examination. At the same time, both countries committed to cooperate on terrorism issues as well as to cooperate on space, cyber security and economic security issues. In this article, the essence is to understand 2+2 ministerial dialogue and the partners of India's 2+2 ministerial dialogue. Right? I hope you understood the article. Students, the title of the next topic is on the ethanol blending program. In this article, we'll understand about the ethanol blending program and you can map this under GS paper 3. Now, previous question was asked on the byproduct of sugar industry, which is indirectly related to ethanol blending. So, such type of questions on ethanol blending can come in the UPSC examination. Now, what is the context that the Indian ethanol blending program has garnered significant attention? Why? Because our country aims to achieve 20% ethanol blend in petrol by 25-26, which means in petrol, let's say 1 liter of petrol, 20% would be that of ethanol, right? What is ethanol? It is an organic compound typically produced by fermenting sugars found in crops such as sugarcane, corn and other starch-rich grains. 1. It is primarily used as biofuel and when blended with petrol, it can act as or it acts as oxygenate that reduces harmful emissions from vehicles. It can be produced in different ways, categorized into first generation, second generation and third generation. Now, first generation ethanol is produced directly from food crops. Very important. This is the main point in the article. Such type of questions will be asked in the prelims examination. First generation from the food crops. Second, from the non-food biomass like the agricultural waste. And the third is from the algae. So, this point is very important from the prelims perspective. First generation, second generation and third generation and the blending of ethanol in petrol. Now, what is ethanol blending? Process of mixing ethanol with petrol to create a fuel blend. The target blend is often denoted as E10, E20. Now, E20 refers 20% blend of ethanol. 10 represents 10% blending of ethanol in petrol. The government has set an ambitious target of 20% ethanol blending by 25-26. It aligns with the country's broader objective of reducing import dependency on the fossil fuel, that is oil, mitigating environmental pollution and promoting the use of renewable energy sources. Now, to achieve this target, India needs to produce approximately 1000 crore liters of ethanol annually. As of 2024, the blending percentage has reached around 13 to 15%. In 2021, it is 8%, which is a significant improve from 2021. So, this is about the ethanol blending. I hope you understood the article. Students, now it's time to discuss few questions so that you understand if you understood all the 5 topics. Let's start with the first question. Which of the following countries is not considered one of the Baltic states? Estonia, yes, it's a Baltic state. Latvia, yes, it's a Baltic state. Lithuania, yes. Finland is a Nordic country, right? Which means is not considered. Option D is the correct answer. Next question. This is regarding ethanol and ethanol blending. Now, ethanol is an organic compound produced only through the fermentation of sugars found in crops. Wrong. See, this word is creating a problem. There are various ways through which ethanol can be produced, like first generation, second and third. So, this is incorrect. First generation ethanol is derived from non-food biomass like agriculture. Wrong. This is the second generation. Ethanol blending refers to the process of mixing ethanol with petrol, and the government of India aims to achieve 20% ethanol blending by, yes, this is correct. ethanol blending can reduce oil import dependency and mitigate environmental pollution, but it can also raise concern about the food security and agriculture sustainability. Yes, this one is also correct, which means option B is the correct answer for question number 2. Next, India has conducted the 2+2 ministerial dialogue with how many above countries? US, yes. UK, yes. Russia, Brazil, Japan, yes. All the 5. That is option D is the correct answer for question number 3. Next, TRIA. TRIA is a constitutional body. Wrong. It is a statutory body. Is responsible for regulating tariffs for telecom services in India to ensure they are fair and yes, this one is correct. So option B is the correct answer for question number 4. These are very easy questions. Now, consider the following military exercises. How many of the above are bilateral military exercises conducted between India and Japan? India and Japan, Vajra Prahar we have with US, Surya Kiran with Nepal, Veer Guardian with Japan, Yuddha Abhyas again with US. Only one. Question number 5, only one. Now, mains practice question. In a system traditionally governed by merit and reserved quotas, does the introduction of lateral entry into the Indian civil services represent a progressive reform or a disruptive challenge? Critically analyze the implication of lateral entry on the balance between specialized expertise and the principles of equity and social justice. Friends, if you read this question, you might feel that how complicated the question is. But in essence, the question is really very simple. The question is asking you to highlight the issues in the bureaucratic structure and why implementing lateral entry is must to reform the civil services, and here you also need to address the issues associated with the lateral entry. That's it. So in the introduction, you have to start by mentioning that because of the reforms or because of the issues in the bureaucratic structure, it is important that we think about the lateral entry policy. This is what you have to mention in the introduction. At the same time, mention what is lateral entry. That is induction of the expertise from outside, that is private sector or the academics, so that they bring special knowledge or special skill set and fresh perspective to find solution to the problems. Then in the body, you can highlight the recommendation given by the second ARC or let's say the Niti Aayog body. Then you can highlight some of the pros and cons, or you can also highlight the issues in the bureaucratic structure. That is, they are resistant to change. We are unable to utilize the potential of the civil servants. Then you can highlight about the lateral entry, few pros, like for example, they bring special skill set, right, fresh perspective in the functioning of the government. Then few cons, for example, they undermine the meritocracy, they undermine the reservation policy. And then in the conclusion, you can mention that lateral entry should be implemented gradually. Care should be taken that the lateral entry is not bypassing the reservation system, because reservation is a tool for social justice. And by implementing it gradually and monitoring it regularly, we can make necessary changes and reform the civil services in total, so as to make the governance effective to benefit the people. This is how you write means-based answer. I hope students you understood how to write the means-based questions answer. That's it from our DNA session. I hope you understood each and every topic that we discussed into this session. Students, if you want us to continue with our DNA session, then please do like, share and subscribe Narayana IAS. Thank you so much.